I, unlike everyone else reviewing this DLC, actually took the time to play it, which is why I didn't make a video on it within the first couple of days of it coming out. You know, a lot of people I saw were covering it day one. And I think that was a mistake. It needs to be said more in the Nintendo gaming community that you cannot review games within the first couple of days, especially if it's a relatively big major release. You know, I took a while to produce my Hollow Knight Silksong video. I took time to like play through Donkey Kong Bonanza and talk about the game as a whole, and I took my time with this DLC. And I can tell you, as someone who has actually played Donkey Kong Bonanza Emerald Rush, that everyone else is completely wrong. Not only is Emerald Rush a good addition to Donkey Kong Bonanza, not only is Donkey Kong Island an amazing location, they are, in fact, in a lot of ways, better than the base game. Unlike a lesser DLC, such as Hollow Knight Silksong, Emerald Rush is actually fun to play. Emerald Rush has real challenge to it. Emerald Rush is well balanced, difficult, while still being fun and engaging. Emerald Rush has endless replay value and reasons to revisit it. I was shocked by just how difficult Emerald Rush gets on the higher difficulties. And that's actually a major thing that I'd like to emphasize talking about Emerald Rush, because I feel as if most other reviewers never really spent the time playing the higher difficulties because they just kind of assumed that Emerald Rush was the same thing over and over again. No, as you progress through Emerald Rush, you unlock new perks, new features, more of your abilities are stripped away at the beginning, and accomplishing your tasks become more and more difficult, which forces you to play more optimally and improve your play style. And that's something that really needs to be emphasized about Emerald Rush. The thing that no one wants to talk about, that no one wants to admit, the thing that makes this better than the base game is that this specific side mode emphasizes Donkey Kong Bonanza's core mechanics better than the core game. So, where the core game is like kind of a basic action game with like this really unique destructibility mechanic, Donkey Kong Bonanza Emerald Rush features a unique setup in which every single time you play, your abilities will be stripped away and you will have to build yourself back up in order to optimally move across the island, the area, find more emeralds, accomplish your goals, and continuously power yourself up. It is endlessly addicting. It is so much fun. And one of the interesting things about it is because of how this is structured, even in the same round, you will find yourself going back through old areas, destroying terrain, and trying your best to cut through the environment and get to where you need to be. It is essentially a better use of the game's central mechanics than the actual core game, in which you have a clear objective and a goal that you need to reach, where you have to go through a linear path and just there's no it feels almost as if the game discourages you from exploring and messing around with the core mechanics in the actual experience. But in Emerald Rush, because of the nature of it, you are free to kind of come up with your own insane strategies and tactics. Like, for example, playing this game has really made me appreciate turf surf more, because turf surf is slightly faster than just going around on the ground, and using it to catapult yourself across the across a beach or whatever, or down a mountain. Like, it is a little bit quicker than simply just jumping off and rolling, and that's not something you would have cared about in the base game. But in Emerald Rush, like, every second matters. You are desperately trying to stay ahead of the clock to acquire as many emeralds as you can before the round ends. And since the game features multiple different layers and multiple different difficulty settings, all of which have all of these really well implemented random elements to them, no two playthroughs are the same. So every time you ramp up the difficulty, things are radically different. One of the interesting things I noticed is that my initial strategy of boosting void goals so I get more emeralds per clearing one, that was a perfectly viable strategy in the earlier difficulty settings, but later on, you're better off getting multipliers for beating enemies and through other methods. So because of the way the game works, because of how it keeps tacking on more and more rounds, because of how demanding they get, like you will find yourself completely changing your strategy and evolving as the game does. And it leads into the best roguelike I have ever played because this game fixes the core issue that I have with a lot of roguelikes, where a lot of them feel very random. It feels very, very artificially difficult. They don't really feel as if they're well put together. They feel lazy almost. Like the developers just put a bunch of random assets together and just put them in a blender and just unleash them and like, oh, you're hardcore if you beat this thing that we put in front of you. Like Bonanza's not like that. Like it doesn't really matter if you win or lose a game of Bonanza. It's more about how far you can get and how much you succeed. And it encourages you to keep trying again. And it emphasizes the unique qualities of roguelites. It emphasizes the unique features of the genre while not being particularly overwhelming or like ridiculous. Like it's challenging without feeling annoying, obnoxious, or just plain broken. It strikes a really nice balance, like something that I didn't really feel in the Off the Hook DLC for Splatoon 3, which is a game I really hated, by the way. Like this feels lately it feels like Nintendo was experimenting more with a lot of genres that are more popular in the Western world. And I think roguelites are a really good example of that, where they've been experimenting with this concept for a while. And this feels like a nice deviation from the typical formula, where it feels like a proper evolution that takes advantage of the game's of Donkey Kong Bonanza's unique features, mechanics, and abilities while kind of fixing the core problem that I had with roguelites while just being genuinely fun to play. Another thing I've seen YouTubers complain about is this idea that there's nothing to do on DK Island. Never mind that having no banana gems on the island makes perfect sense considering, they're unique to the Ingot Isle location. Uh, the simple fact of the matter is, DK Island does have a lot of unique things going for it. For example, there's an easy method to grind gold here by using squawks by handing over chips to squawks, you can get gold, which helps you which is a quick way to bolster your coffers and get you going on 100% completion. I hated grinding gold in this game, so having a more effective method of doing that is well worth the money for me alone. But you also have this really cool post-game collectible system, similar to Super Smash Bros. Melee's trophy system or Wind Waker's Nintendo Gallery. We have the ability to set up statues all around Donkey Kong Island. And I know a lot of people like complained about this. They complained that like it didn't really serve a purpose, but like I very much disagree with that. I think the statues are well placed. I think they're well made. I think they're interesting. And it's really cool, like handing over chips to Squawks and seeing him like bring back something random. And it's always something different. So it reminds me a lot of like, Minish Cap's gotcha system where you just put some money in and you see like you get something on the island. Like it's cool. Like it's gonna add like quite a bit of it gives you reason to do Emerald Rush. And people like love saying that this kind of thing has no purpose, but I really disagree because, seeing these statues, pop up around the island, like it's satisfying. Looking at them, learning the characters' names, like, being nostalgic about the adventure, like this is going to be a big thing for a lot of people. I grew up, wanting to collect every single trophy in Super Smash Bros. Melee. That was a very important thing for me. And as an adult, like I'm doing it again with Donkey Kong Bonanza, a game that I don't love nearly as much. And I do think it needs to be like explored more, the kind of contradiction of game reviewers, because they always do this thing where they're just like, oh, what's the point of doing this? Why would I want to do this? Why would I want to play this? And like the simple answer is because it's fun, and that's the thing I've always noticed when it comes to the reviews of this game, is that they're not focusing on the game's qualities and what it brings to the table. They are focused on like superficial things that don't actually matter. The idea that, for example, that there should have been a free DLC, or that there should have been cut content, that this was cut content, and that Nintendo is ripping you off. And I really strongly can't like disagree with that. Like I completely disagree with that because this mode is going to add, I think, another 10 to 20 hours of playtime for me personally. Like I see myself like like getting every single trophy, and because of you know this is the thing that got me back into the game, because I was completely done with Donkey Kong Bonanza before this DLC came out. And I think I'll 100% this, do all the emerald rushes and get all the trophies before I'll 100% the base game. Like in a lot of ways, like I enjoy this more than I did the initial base game. And that's something that really needs to be studied, because I did not feel that way about the free Mario Odyssey update. The paid DLC updates we get for Nintendo games today are more extensive than the free updates we got back then. And that's definitely something we really do need to discuss and talk about, because I keep seeing this being brought up as an excuse to downplay Bonanza, but Emerald Rush. But like I've said this several times, but I am very tired of seeing people complain about the price of the games. I'm very tired about people complaining about like DLC and what Nintendo has been doing and just like things like this, because to me, as someone who actually has played the games, like I can tell you that all of it falls flat. Like none of it really seems like it's going to stand the test of time. Like, is Emerald Rush such a poorly made DLC that it's going to undermine this game's legacy? Like, no, absolutely not. Like, but the community desperately tried to paint it that way. They tried to make this out to be a scam or a ripoff or whatever, when in actuality, what's going to happen for most fans is that people are going to play through Bonanza, they're going to love it, and then they're going to buy the DLC, and then they're going to experience the game in a whole new way. you know that's what this DLC is intended to do. You don't have to buy the DLC right away if you don't want to. Like that's definitely something that I do think a lot of people need to be reminded whenever they start talking about how you have to pay $100 for the full experience or whatever. Like, no, you don't. Like, if you really feel strongly about it, you don't have to get the DLC right away. Like, it's not complicated. It's not hard. This isn't complex. This isn't rocket science. Like, why is every Nintendo YouTuber complaining about DLC? It's just, especially because I remember this like a couple of years ago. Like, I remember people were begging games to have more DLC. Like, how many people have we seen like begging for DLC for Pikmin 4 instead of like producing an entirely new game? So people are going to do this thing where they complain about the DLC not being substantial enough, but they're also going to be begging for new games. So which is it? Like this is DLC. It's supposed to be add-on content that is not as expansive as the core experience. So what more were you expecting from Emerald Rush? Is kind of my question about that. Like I have thoroughly enjoyed Emerald Rush, and considering how good it is, its price point, I do have to emphasize, as someone who has played both, that yes, this is a better game than Silksong. It is more challenging. It is more balanced. It is more fun to play. It is of course a better looking game. Like I would much rather have spent $20 on Donkey Kong Bonanza than I would have Silksong. Silksong was a massive disappointment, did not live up to the original Hollow Knight in any way, shape, or form. While Bonanza itself did not live up to the original Donkey Kong games. I've always maintained that. I've always said that Donkey Kong Country and 64, Donkey Kong Country 2 are some of my favorite games ever. And Bonanza doesn't really live up to that in any way, shape, or form. But at the end of the day, like Bonanza did feel like a massive step forward for the series. That even if you're like me and don't like it as much as the older stuff, like this is still a monumental achievement for Nintendo and the Mario team, and something I really want to see more of. Just a wildly different take on established characters. I can't wait to see what they come up with when they bring Star Fox or F-Zero back, and that's definitely one of those things that I think a lot of people aren't prepared for. Is just what Neo Nintendo, the Nintendo of the future, is going to do in regards to like their iconic characters. Like this game really should have set a precedent like for expectations as to how wildly different the future of Nintendo actually will be. And that's something that I think a lot of people are coping and seething about. I think people just don't like acknowledging how something like Silk Song is very stagnant, very boring, very samey, while Donkey Kong Bonanza, being sold at a higher price point, has infinitely more potential, infinitely more opportunities, and the team behind it is probably going to put out a new game before Hollow Knight 3 can even get off the ground. It needs to be understood. It needs to be studied just how good of a DLC Emerald Rush actually is, because this is something that I will get a lot of mileage out of, but the rest of the community is desperately trying to make these comparisons against lesser products that just will never compete with it. Donkey Kong Bonanza, it has been a huge success story. Pretty much everyone likes it, and the only people who are in denial about this are boomers like Darkside Phil, who can't handle these kinds of these kinds of games. And I think Nintendo is killing it right now, and we are going to see more and more interesting video game releases very soon.